I have waited tables for the last 3 years. During my shift last night, a group of 4 women in their late 20s came in. They were a pleasure to have as customers. They ordered 4 of our house cocktails to start with and then went over the menu for their entrees. Then I was on my way back to their booth with the drinks on a tray. I walked by the back side and overheard one of them talking about how she was 14 weeks along. When I rounded back, they were talking about the same topic and it was clear to me that she was pregnant. I figured her having 1 drink wasn't a big deal. They ordered their entrees and I went off to handle other tables. About 5 minutes later, they called me over again and asked for another round. At this point I started getting concerned, but I took the order and cheerfully said I'd be right back. This time, I went to the bartender and asked him to make one of them a virgin cocktail. He was confused, but since he's a good friend of mine, I told him to just trust me. A few cocktails later, hers strictly virgin, they started getting rowdy, and Mrs. Pregnant Woman was also getting into it. I figured that since she didn't notice, things were okay. The problem came when I took them their check, and they asked to split the bill at the register. When Mrs. Pregnant Woman got to the counter, I saw her cocktails were marked with virgin. My bartender had edited each in the system for inventory. It was too late for me to edit them back, so I just had her pay, hoping that she wouldn't look at the receipt. They all thanked me and left, leaving a generous tip in the process. They were talking in the parking lot for the next short while, presumably waiting for an Uber. Several minutes later Mrs. Pregnant Woman came back and asked what virgin on the receipt meant. I fessed up that it meant non-alcoholic. She blank stared me for a few seconds and then asked if she had ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. I said no, but told her that I assumed she wanted one seeing as she was pregnant. It was a lame lie and I'll admit it, but she looked me in the eye and asked me to return her part of the tip. I did so. Then she talked to my manager. My manager took me into her office and literally shrieked at me until hoarse. I stood my ground and told her that I'm not going to be responsible for FAS. She told me that she was taking me off the calendar until she decided what to do with me. She also informed me that I could get the restaurant in serious trouble for discrimination. And upon examination of my state's laws, she is correct. But when I talked to my mother and father about it tonight, they told me that they understood my position. The entire staff at the restaurant is against me and I think that I'm going to call in and tell my manager that I quit. But I still feel in the right here. I have a friend from high school who has a teenage daughter that recently started having fainting spells. I remembered that my nephew had this issue as a child and texted in Messenger to ask my older sister about what they found out about him and if it sounded like my friend's daughter. I asked via text because she is pretty busy. She answered that he still has it and it's a condition he has with anxiety and it overwhelms his heart sometimes. An hour or so later she started talking, again, via text, about how her son and daughter, both young adults now, are mentally handicapped and have psychotic episodes. Saying that the daughter totally made up the flea issue they had in their house and her mental issues caused her to break out in hives. This made me confused as I've been with her kids and even took my niece on vacation with us so she could ride the slides with my husband. Not my thing anymore, and she was perfectly fine. Well, an hour later my sister texted me saying all of that was not her. After she had told me about her son's anxiety issue she had went to work and her husband. Yes, her husband had pretended to be her and even Googled all this BS up. I already had issues with her husband. He has lied and has had other issues before. To say I was angry is an understatement. Her husband, who is not her children's father, was bad-mouthing and telling me her kids are mentally unstable. Carl already has a past of being like this to her kids and my sister went along with it. I told her, that was it. I'm done. I went no contact for the past month, although I kept in touch with the kids. She has a younger son, age 15. And he does not get along with her husband, either. I told the elder too what he had said so they had a heads up. My sister defended him initially but apologized 2 days ago. I told her that her husband needs to apologize for himself, though. He is a grown man. Until then my kids and husband will not be attending anything outside of holidays at my mom's house, their neighbors. My mom can visit or I can visit her, but my kids will have nothing to do with her husband. Even after the apology, he will not be family to me or mine. He is deeply homophobic, drunk every time we visit, and racist. He is the reason my sister is not someone I want to raising my kids if something happened to us. My mom told me I should let it go, because family, but my husband backs me 100%. He claims he thought I knew it was him because they share a FB account. He was looking at other women's accounts and talking to them. So my sister insisted they share an account so he would not do that. Even if it were him not pretending to be my sister. He was spreading lies about two people I care for deeply. My husband Derek and I have been married for 3 years, together for 7 total. Several years ago, about 6 now, I guess, I worked closely with a male coworker, Paul, that Derek was never fond of. Paul and I never had an inappropriate relationship. Derek's jealousy wasn't completely out of nowhere. I get why he felt that way. Those couple years were a perfect storm of relationship stress. I was working long hours. We were living apart after trying and failing to move in together. Our relationship was still fairly new. And then you add in a handsome coworker I had to spend long hours with and saw more than my boyfriend at the time. Paul was the source of several fights. Again, we never did anything that wasn't completely kosher. Eventually I told Derek he needed to trust me and get over it, or we were going to have to break up. He said he would stop worrying, and for the most part things were good. When Paul transferred out of state a few months later, things were really good. There were no worries at all and our relationship has been amazingly strong ever since. This last weekend, my husband went out with a couple friends to some bars and a football game. When he came home, he was pretty wasted. We talked for a bit, and he mentioned how a friend of his had told him that he broke up with his girlfriend because she cheated on him. I commented on how that was a bummer and good for him for finding out before they got too serious. Derek, however, had a different take on it. He said it was a shame because they had seemed like a good couple and if they really loved each other his friend could move past the cheating. Just like he had with me. At first I thought my husband was admitting to cheating on me, and asked him what he meant. He told me he always knew that Paul and I had slept together at least once all those years ago. But he knew I was the one for him and forgave me. I told Derek that I had never so much as even hugged Paul, except maybe at his going away party, let alone slept with him. Derek sort of just patted me on the arm, said of course, and passed out. The next morning I asked him about the conversation and he said it was okay, he had forgiven me, it wasn't even an issue. I again stressed that I had never cheated on him with anybody and I needed him to believe me. He sort of did the same, of course you didn't, babe wink thing again and went to work. Every time I've tried to talk to him since, he won't hear me out. I'm this close to losing it with him. I need him to know that I never cheated, and I'm hurt that he thinks I would do something like that. What do I do? Do I just let him have this since it's not really hurting anything, or what? I don't want my own husband to think so little of me that he thinks I would cheat. That's not who I am. I am a 43 years old female, have been with my partner, he's 50, for 6 years now. We have been living together for 5 of them. We are not married and we do not plan to marry in the future. I have a son, he's 19, that is currently a high school senior. My partner has a daughter, she's 21, who is going to college. When I met my partner I was a widow of 3 years. I am lucky enough to have a very lucrative business and some family money. Also my late husband left a substantial estate, including the house we live in. The house is a family home so it passed to my son as the only heir. My partner also makes good money and the difference in our lifestyles was pretty much negligible. But while I and my late husband made sure to not spoil our son, he was responsible for keeping his room clean even though we have a housekeeper. He had chores during the weekends. We taught him how to cook, his allowance is reasonable, he has to save for expensive purchases like a car, a PS5, etc. My current partner and his ex-wife spoil their daughter rotten. Due to an incident when we first moved in together, she demanded my son's bedroom since it was the second biggest. Got rejected since it was his home and she only spends the weekend. And after some family therapy we agreed that she will be treated like a guest by me. She will have to follow the house rules and that at the extent of our relationship. Now while she is spoiled she is a good girl, academically excellent. Except for the aforementioned incident very respectful and just a pleasant young woman. The problem is that I did not know the extent to which my partner spent money on her. He pays some money as rent that I put into my son's college fund, and we split the common bills in half. Everything else is our own responsibility, so we don't know much about each other's finances. Now my son is planning to do a tour of East Asia during the summer, and I was happy to give him the money to do so, as a gift for getting into a very prestigious college. When my stepdaughter heard about it, she asked her dad to pay for a tour of Europe, since he didn't send her on one after she got into college. He agreed because he never says no. But he came to me asking me to lend him close to $30,000 because he can't afford the trip on his own. I am not even giving that much to my son, and his plane tickets are more expensive. I refused. I said that since this wasn't an emergency, he can save and send her on the trip after she graduates college. Now he is not talking to me, saying that I am choosing favorites. I have no relationship with his daughter, so I don't know how that even is applicable. And that I am putting money over his happiness and relationship with his daughter. I can easily afford to lend him the full amount, I just don't want to, because his reasons are not convincing enough.